Generation X didn't just grow up differently, their brains were trained for survival. They never talk about themselves, but somehow hold everything together. Generation X, born roughly between 1965 and 1980. They're your older coworkers who never complain about anything, ever. Your parents who seem oddly detached sometimes, but always come through. The people who built the internet but don't post breakfast pictures. And here's what nobody tells you about this invisible generation. Their psychology is probably the most misunderstood of any living generation. They were the first generation of latchkey kids on a massive scale. Picture this scenario. It's 1978. You're 8 years old. You come home to an empty house because both parents are working. No smartphone, no Ring cameras, no way for anyone to check you're okay. You let yourself in, make yourself a snack, do homework alone, and wait for someone to eventually come home, hours later, exhausted. A study found that by 1984, approximately 7 million children between ages 5 and 13 were regularly unsupervised after school every day. That's an entire generation learning you can't always count on someone. That empty house did more than make them self-reliant and independent. It drilled in the idea that actions have real consequences, period. Ones you can't talk your way out of, no matter what. When their parents finally showed up, you always knew where you stood. The rules hit hard and fast, no long discussions or negotiations. Nobody cared about how you felt or wanted to talk it out. Step out of line, and you paid for it right then, immediately. Psychologically, this created what researchers call a high-contingency environment, where actions and outcomes were directly linked without buffer time or delays. Your brain learned to predict consequences in real time, automatically, always. Which is why Gen X tends to think 3 steps ahead, constantly, in ways that baffle younger generations who don't understand that mindset. Gen X grew up watching their parents talk big about stability and security, then turn around and rack up divorce rates through the 70s, 80s. They saw people give their all to companies only to get laid off, get pink slips when the next round of layoffs hit without warning. Everyone told them work hard, follow the rules, life will work out. But then the rules just changed right in front of them, repeatedly. So yeah, psychologists might call it defensive pessimism, but Gen X disagrees. They just call it being realistic about how the world actually works. It's not that they're cynical, exactly. It's more like emotional armor. They cross their fingers for good things, but expect the rug pulled, because honestly, that's what kept happening over and over throughout their lives. And that's a big reason you barely hear them on social media. They grew up in a time when privacy was just normal, automatic. When you messed up as a kid, maybe a handful of people knew, and that was that. No phones, no viral videos, no permanent record. Just some awkward memories in a basement or a parking lot somewhere. The idea of blasting your life out for strangers to lot somewhere, the idea of blasting your life out for strangers to see daily, that doesn't feel exciting to them. It feels risky and dangerous, honestly. It's not about not getting tech. They literally built the internet infrastructure. It's about learning early on that less people know, the safer you are. Gen X basically turned irony into a shield to protect themselves emotionally. Crack a joke, keep things at arm's length, laugh it off immediately. You can see exactly where that comes from when you look back. They grew up in the shadow of the Cold War, nuclear threats, when teachers talked about nuclear war like it was just another day, duck and cover drills in school, as if a desk would save anyone. When adults act like everything is about to go up in smoke soon, but also insist you shouldn't worry about it at all, ever. You get used to holding 2 clashing ideas at once, without breaking, and you learn to keep a little distance just in case. But here's what's fascinating. Despite all this difficult childhood trauma, Gen X developed a distinctive approach to work that stands out today. They don't talk about it, don't post about it, they just do it. This work ethic was forged early through jobs that seem archaic now. Paper routes at 5 in the morning in freezing cold, dark weather. Bagging groceries, working fast food registers where you calculated change mentally in your head when the machine broke, which happened all the time. These weren't resume builders, they were raw introductions to the adult world, where a 12-year-old could be responsible for delivering news citywide. They watched their parents' generation get destroyed by corporate restructuring and downsizing, so they never believed in company loyalty, but they're fiercely loyal otherwise, loyal to their own competence, their own skills, their own value, always. They can't control whether they'll get laid off during economic downturns, but they can control whether they're the most valuable person there. There's this weird paradox at the core of Gen X psychology here. They're simultaneously the most independent generation and the most quietly collaborative. They'll never ask for help, figure it out themselves, always have. Been doing that since they were 8 years old, coming home alone. But if you need help, they'll show up without drama or fanfare, without a social media post about it or expecting public recognition. This comes from forming tight bonds with friends out of necessity. When parents were absent, friends became the family you actually relied upon. And let's talk about their relationship with authority, because it's complicated. They respect competence, not titles or fancy degrees or impressive credentials. If you've earned your position through actual skill, they'll follow you anywhere. If you're just someone with a fancy job title who's incompetent, they have zero patience for you at all, none whatsoever, honestly. Gen X questions authority because they watched incompetent authority figures fail, make terrible decisions their entire childhood, from Watergate to Iran-Contra to the fumbled AIDS crisis that killed so many people unnecessarily. They faced serious economic headwinds that their parents' generation hadn't experienced ever. The youngest Gen Xers graduated college right into the dot-com bubble burst. The oldest ones were hitting their stride when 2008 hit. They've been economically traumatized repeatedly, which is why they're more prepared, more likely to have multiple income streams, backup plans, and contingencies. Not because they're entrepreneurial by nature, but because they learned nothing lasts. Gen X tends to struggle with what some researchers have identified clearly as patterns of self-reliance that border on anxiety or control issues. They're incredibly capable at handling crisis situations with remarkable calm composure, but that capability often comes from an unwillingness to depend on others. Research in the Journal of Adult Development shows Gen Xers report something lower levels of seeking social support during stressful periods in life. Not because they don't have people they could ask for help, but because asking feels like admitting defeat or weakness or failure somehow. This self-reliance extended to how they processed information and learned everything. Before the internet, knowledge had a different kind of weight entirely. Gen X spent hours in libraries hunting through card catalog drawers carefully for a single book that might contain the answer they needed desperately. Information had a physical cost. It required effort and time investment. And because of that, they valued what they learned differently, more deeply. Cognitive psychologists describe this as deeper encoding, where effort creates memory, where information that requires effort to obtain becomes more permanently integrated. They learn to fix things with their hands because that's what you did when your bike chain slipped or the TV flickered. You didn't call anyone. You didn't call a technician. You flipped the bike upside down immediately, got grease on your hands, and figured it out through trial and error. This built a mechanical intuition, a belief that with enough patience and a screwdriver, you could master the physical world around you completely. And now they're watching their kids grow up in a completely different world, one with helicopter parents and constant supervision and social media documenting everything.
They gave their kids the attention they never had growing up, but sometimes they worry they've made them too soft, too dependent, too visible, because in the Gen X worldview, being visible means vulnerable. The truth is, Generation X might be the last generation truly to understand what it means to be alone with your thoughts, to be bored, to solve problems without Googling the answer immediately. They're not better than other generations, just different, shaped by history, shaped by a unique moment in history when the old world was dying and the new one hadn't quite been born yet, an awkward transition. They're the bridge generation, connecting past and future, holding things together. And bridges don't get much attention. They're just there, doing the work, holding things together, expecting nothing in return, no recognition, no thanks. And maybe that's the most Gen X thing of all, honestly, not caring if anyone notices them or their contributions at all. If this hit home for you, please subscribe to support these deep dives. And if you want more, hit that join button to become a member. I would genuinely appreciate your support more than you know, really.